Are you tired of all the meta picks in the game and just want to play something different now than all of those broken champions? Then I welcome you back to another RiftGuides WildRift video, but this time we're gonna present you the underrated picks that are far better than you would ever believe they are. But before we hop into the video, let's talk about our question of the day. What's your personal underrated pick? Let me know in the comments below. The first pick on this list is Veigar. Yes, it's Veigar, and it's most of the time Veigar in the bottom lane. With Veigar in the dragon lane, you have a champion that is able to completely deny enemy melee champions and engage combinations because of his cage ability. And this is one of the most important mechanics this champion features. But before we hop into specifically that, we need to talk about his laning phase. Veigar's laning phase isn't the strongest, and let me tell you this, he is going to suffer from mana issues all the time. But don't you worry, because there's a way of fixing this certain problem. It's called starting with the Sapphire Crystal. With the objective spawning at 5 minutes, you'll have more than enough time to get your Luden's Echo anyway. And with the Sapphire Crystal into your bag, you'll get a lot of extra mana during the laning phase, which will help you a lot. And the 25 AP from the Amplifying Tomb don't really do too much whatsoever. So when you start the game, you want to leave the base with a Sapphire Crystal and want to spam your first ability to start stacking it up. That way you're already getting a little bit of value early on without expending any valuable mana that you already would need for the laning phase. For the laning phase itself, you're a little bit passive. You can't really contest too much because of your champion. But you need to aim with your first ability for minion last hits and if possible also champions, because every spell that tags an enemy champion grants you stacks. And spells that lasted minions, your first ability and your second ability, also grant you stacks. But beware, once you complete Luden's Echo, the Luden's Pulse passive is not going to give you stacks if it executes the minions. So please pay proper attention to that. Later on, you also want to max your Veigar stun ability after you max your first ability. Ideally, you put 2 points into your second ability for wave clear, max your first ability, and then the rest of your points go into your third ability. Because your champion loves to control the zone. It's a champion that's absolutely bonkers against melee champions because they just can't play into you. The moment they are touched by the cage, you can literally one-shot them, and there's not much they can do about this, unless they want to heavily invest into a QSS, which only helps them once. The next cage is going to ruin them. Another absolutely broken champion is Soraka. And yes, you've heard me right, Soraka is broken. Soraka as a champion loves, similar to Veigar, to play against melee champions. And here's why. Every time a melee champion is close enough, Soraka can hit her first ability and reduce the life cost of a second ability up to 100% once it's fully skilled. Taking that into consideration, if she's able to do this, she can spam heal her allies as long as she has enough mana. Unironically, Soraka is also very good against champions that want to all-in your teammates. That also goes for assassins, as long as she's able to properly place down the silent zone and lock them in place. Because what can a Zed do if the Soraka is fast enough of placing her silence below herself once the X appears, and then the Zed cannot use any spells, which is the biggest damage difference possible. And with no spells available, the Zed also cannot go back, which means he's stuck there, unless he runs out of the silence, which grants her allies a lot of time to punish him as well. Another thing you have to keep in mind is the ability of Soraka to influence the map on a global scale. With the Protect enchant and her ultimate ability, she can heal her allies for super high amounts of HP. Also, you shouldn't forget that once you go to the point where you can just enchant your second ability and just use it for like one specific big heal, you'll be surprised how much it heals when you really need to use it for that specific purpose. Because sometimes just healing one target for a lot of healing is the difference maker. And before you tell me, but all of this anti-healing in the game, so much anti-healing here, so much anti-healing there, it doesn't matter. I've had plenty of games with 5 anti-healing items on the enemy team, which is by the way 5 times 800 gold, which is a lot of gold, and I still healed for 2000 a minute easily every single game because it is not hard. But for the laning phase, you have to get used to something different. You are super aggressive. You want to beat up the enemy champions over and over and over again. On your level 1, your first ability heals you for up to 60 without AP involved. And since you're starting with a relic shield, you're going to enjoy yourself beating up the enemy champions champions. And once you hit level 2, all the traits of the previous past are going to be gone, because once you hit your first ability and you heal your AD carry, you're going to realize how much healing you have. So please trade towards that idea, and never, and I repeat, never, unless you can 1,000,000,000% guarantee kills, skill your silence on level 2. It's going to lose you your lane for no reason. Heal is just so much more powerful. The next champion on our list is Tristana. Tristana as a champion can be played mid lane and in the dragon lane. It's not too much of a problem if you're feeling really fancy, even in the baron lane, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you really want to hate your life when the jungler comes by and just kills you, and once he kills you once, the game is over for you. But on mid lane and the dragon lane, it's a lot different. But what compared to the past made Tristana such a decent champion now, or such an underrated champion? The changes to Navori Quick Bites and Demolish really helped her out in the sense of destroying structures and having enough abilities to carry fights. Don't forget, Tristana is super dependent on her abilities, because other than that she just has auto attacks. But her abilities are super crazy because they are for 1 an attack speed steroid, a relocation ability, and a burst AoE bomb that takes down structures and zones the enemies off them unless they want to take significant amounts of damage. But compared to this, her other abilities, such as her relocation abilities and the ability to shoot enemies away, grant her a lot of safety that usually isn't really common for AD carries in this game. With this safety in mind, you can, especially against melee compositions, plant a bomb on someone's head and shoot him back into his team to deal some AoE burst damage. There's also some hidden interaction which you can go for if you have a support that has Mandate. You can go for a static shift, because the static shift will proc the Mandate of your teammate and allow you to deal a lot of poke damage without even committing anything but a normal auto attack. It's a nice combo you should definitely look into. Another champion that is underrated and has been flying under the radar again is Corki. Corki as a champion is always useful and can basically neutralize any lane because he isn't forced to participate in laning. Similar to a mage, he's able to play the lane from range with just spells and just do nothing. While doing so, he's not able to really die, and then he's scaling for free. And in addition to this, he's also able to influence objective fights with his package. This package is a great zone control tool which can either be used to disengage, engage if you're feeling really spicy, or just control the zone in a sense that your teammates are allowed to play and the enemy champions, especially if they're melee champions, can't really go through this, unless they want to die, of course. Comparing him to other AD carries is something, or he features something that they also don't have. Area of effect damage on basically every single ability. Apart from his auto attacks, of course. Also, his basic attacks deal mainly magical damage, which makes armor a really problematic stat, because it doesn't really do too much against a Corki. And itemizing magic resist in this game is very tricky because it usually just hinders your damage capabilities, because there's not much you can go for in terms of good items unless they're super supportive ones. And then, who's gonna deal damage for you? Because you only build those items to support other teammates, to enhance their damage, or just become a frontline. And a frontline is nothing else but a meat sack. And the meat sack gets beaten up until either his teammates win for him, or he dies and his teammates die alongside him. Not so funny. And the last pick on this list is Misfortune. Misfortune is, in the API, a very high champion, like a very high win rate, yet we don't see her played that often. This champion is quite good in what she does. She's able to influence the fights from afar, has a decent laning phase, can reset with ease thanks to her second ability's movement speed, so she's not forced to go boost early, and can even itemize into more damage options. Also, compared to other AD carries, she is not really forced to auto-attack a lot in terms of positioning. She can rather use her spells to influence the fight. Even just her first ability deals a lot of damage during a fight and makes the backline not as secure as you think they are. Also, whenever you think about a Misfortune in an objective fight, never rule her out because of her third ability ultimate combination that literally lays waste to most teams in this game. But if there was something that I would say is an issue with Misfortune, it's mana. Because if you go for mana immune, you will see that you'll lack crit quite early, and lacking crit is quite a problem on an AD carry. On the other hand, going for Essence Reaver doesn't really provide you with enough mana, because the item doesn't really get your mana back, because it's only a little bit of a percentage of missing mana. So even with that in mind, it's not enough, and I really hope that Essence Reaver is maybe, just maybe, seeing a slight mana change in the future again, as they did before. And that's it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and if you want more RiftGuides content, leave a like, hit the bell, and obviously come back for more. See you next time.